call this meeting to order. This is the regular school board meeting of the Northfield Public Schools. It is Monday, June 9th, 7 o'clock. Dr. Richardson, there were a few items in our table file.
Yes, in your table file you should find a number of personnel items, including appointments, increase, decrease, and change in assignments, one resignation, also an addendum to the Northfield Swim Club agreement, and a long-term contract with Canvas Church. Also an item for information in terms of a board appointment to the District Youth Council.
Very good. If there's no objection, we will add these to the agenda as we move forward. Right. Public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the district to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? All right. We will move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packet the minutes from the meeting, our last meeting, which is May 27th. Is there a motion to approve these minutes? So moved. Moved by Carrie Griffith, seconded by Ann. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, meaning the minutes are approved. Announcements and recognition.
Okay, we do have a couple this evening. First of all, we have 7 student athletes who have or will be competing in state tournaments this spring. In state girls track and field meet on the 6th and 7th of June. Those that competed were Abby Stetz, Anna Pfefferle, Alexis Kiefer, Emma Rizak, Maya Jurek, and Kaya Bierman. Also, we have a student at the state girls golf meet, Northfield High School senior, Ashley Hauser. We also, and we need an appropriate drum roll, Eric. You ready? Okay. If you remember, I kind of hinted last time that there was something that would be coming along with the other WINGS grant that we received that helped to support our work with our preschool programming, and we talked about the idea of the 21st Century Community Learning Center. Well, Erin received a note just the other day. Actually, she received it while she was in Africa. I received it a little more locally. We've received a formal word that the community school project at Greenville Park Elementary was selected as one of the state of Minnesota's 21st Century Community Learning Center grant recipients. So pending adequate progress in meeting the grant's key goals, which I have no doubt that we will, and continued federal appropriations, a little more iffy, this grant will provide over $92,000 a year in funding for up to 5 years to support expanded out-of-school time programming, including after-school, evening, and summer programming of children and families at Greenville Park Elementary. The proposed plan is an exciting collaborative effort involving a host of community stakeholders. The state only funded about 20% of the applicants statewide, so just getting into that mix is pretty impressive and really says a lot about the hard work of Erin and other members of her staff and other agencies that were involved in putting this together. As we move forward, we're looking for individuals to join the Community School Advisory Council, so we'll make that initial pitch right now. The Advisory Council will be made up of community partners, parents, school district staff, and Greenville staff. The Advisory Council will meet approximately once a month, and if you're interested in being part of that Advisory Council, please contact Erin Mayberry. We will also be posting a position to coordinate the work of the Community School Project. We hope to post this position in the next few weeks. So if you know people that might be interested in applying, please refer them to the school district website. That position is scheduled to start in early August. So again, when you think about the fact that there were not a lot of these grants funded, we're with just about 20% across the board, and the amount of this grant, because we really got every penny we asked for, I think this is really going to have the potential to really impact Greenville Park in a very, very positive way, to provide programming, and to provide opportunities for kids and for parents and for staff in that building to do a lot of things that they have been wanting to do, and we really just didn't know how we were going to find the resources to do it. So again, thank you so much to the community services staff and other members of the community that were involved in putting this grant together. I know it was a big, big project, and it's nice to see it come out in that way. So, excellent. And then finally, if any of you happen to glance at the Hamlin Spring 2014 College Magazine. On the front cover is Josh Wood, class of 15. Remember, Josh Wood was part of our Torch program. And this tells his story in terms of his experiences and the impact that Torch had on really changing his life as far as not only thinking about college, but also getting college credit before he left high school. Now is targeting, obviously, graduation and moving forward in his career. So a very, very positive piece about Josh, and also about the impact that Northfield High School and the Torch program had on his success. And I believe that's everything I have.
Other announcements or recognition? All right. We are ready to move on to our first item, which is the Professional Learning Communities presentation. Looks like we have a full panel tonight.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you for allowing us this opportunity to share our PLC, Professional Learning Community story, with you this evening. We have what will essentially be a several chapter report of the PLC story. After my remarks, two elementary RTI coaches, Becky Gainey and Diane Torbenson, will present information about the 3 joint elementary PLCs that were held this past school year. And this was something new that encouraged collaboration between the 3 elementary schools. Rose Turnicliffe and Ellen Muha will present on the English Language Arts PLCs at the secondary level. And then on July 14th, something to look forward to in July, Kate Woodstrup will complete the PLC story by sharing the outstanding work the Elementary Art PLC has done, particularly in the area of common assessments across the elementary schools. With the Wednesday late starts, we've had 36 hours of time for PLC meetings this year, plus 2 hours today, for a total of 38 hours. And today, PLCs had time in the afternoon to meet, finalize their evidence of practice documents, and begin discussion and organizing for next year. And at the end of the day today, the PLCs all met together to share their work with building colleagues and celebrate the results before leaving for the summer. Across the district, we have 73 PLC teams, which is quite a large number, ranging from the 0 to 3-year-old group, the teachers of those, at Longfellow, to the World Language PLC at the high school. Next year, we will have 38 hours set aside specifically for PLC work, beginning with 2 hours on the first Wednesday of fall workshop. At the elementary level, the PLCs receive support from the RTI coaches through data collection and analysis. The RTI coaches are not assigned to a specific PLC, but rather are available to provide support for any of the PLCs. The addition of the regular screenings and progress monitoring allows for careful monitoring of student progress. Most of the elementary PLCs are formed by grade level. That's how they're organized, except for the specialists in media, music, FIAD, and art, which meet together across the 3 elementary schools. The secondary PLCs are mostly organized around subject areas. Some combine middle school and high school, with family and consumer science being one example, since they have just one teacher at each building. We use the district shared folders for storage and communication for PLC documents. This allows principals and other administrators to view minutes and SMART goals, and the teachers are able to update their documents. Twice a year, evidence of practice forms are completed and posted on our school district website. And the end of the year, evidence of practice documents should be completed and posted by this Friday. That's our goal. One of the functions of our district curriculum and staff development committee is to approve and fund PLC grants. We set aside $6,000, which is not a huge amount, each year for these grants. Individual PLCs apply through a written process, and that's subject to DCSDC approval. We have funded attendance at workshops and state-level conferences, as well as many books for PLC book studies. And as you can see, the grant must be used to support the SMART goal of the PLC. This quote sums up the professional learning community process quite well and leads us to the joint PLCs held at the elementary level this past year. Diane Becky will share that with you now.
we have the yellow packet that you were handed this evening is just background information for what we're going to be sharing tonight. I'm Diane Torbenson, and this is Becky Gainey. We're two of the 6 elementary RTI coaches. We also would like to thank the other RTI coaches in the elementary for being here tonight. We're happy to be here tonight speaking to you about something exciting we started this year. This doesn't look quite right.
Can you go a little backward more?
Sorry.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
That looks better.
Huh?
I think so.
There you go.
Okay, well anyway, we are excited to be here tonight sharing with you something we started this year called Joint PLCs, as Mary was saying. On 3 occasions this year, during our regular PLC time, we brought the individual building PLC groups together to work as a larger PLC in the district, as a larger group as district PLCs. For example, I was with the 2nd grade teachers in the district. So the Bridgewater, Sibley, and Greenville 2nd grade teachers met together, and I was the facilitator. We formed 10 groups in all, each led by the RTI coaches, a school psychologist, or Mary Hansen. The staff reaction was positive, and we found that these meetings were rewarding and energizing. Our purpose, as you can see up here, was to build district-wide capacity, explore shared beliefs, and unify and ignite our collective wisdom. And we started on November 20th at Bridgewater with our first joint PLC. Our focus was on mindset, based on the book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. Prior to the joint PLC, each building showed a 10-minute video called The Power of Belief, and that's your first page, and the yellow handout goes with that. We learned that of these 2 mindsets, fixed and growth, they lead to very different behaviors and results. In a fixed mindset, people believe that intelligence is static. People of this mindset tend to avoid challenges, give up easily, and see effort as fruitless. They often feel threatened by the success of others. However, in a growth mindset, people believe that intelligence can be developed. This leads to a desire to learn. People of this mindset often embrace challenges, persist in the face of setbacks, and see effort as a pathway to mastery. They want to try harder to learn even more. The key to success is in a growth mindset. Research shows that when we directly try to build grit and persistence, it's not nearly as effective as addressing the mindset that underlies them. That was our background information before the meeting. And then we gathered on the 20th, and we started with a PLC wordcraft activity to remind ourselves of the real goal of PLCs. This was a great way to get the staff moving and interacting with others. Staff were paired up and asked to brainstorm the meanings or synonyms for professional and learning and community. In the end, they were asked to write a concise definition of PLC. Throughout this activity, they were changing partners, they were building trust in each other, and they were coming together. This is a great way to remind ourselves of the power of PLC groups. We believe that this work in the joint PLC can positively impact the students district-wide. After that wordcraft activity, we really focused most of our time on core beliefs about children. Our background knowledge of mindset played a role in this activity. Our goal here was for the staff to remember that all children can learn. Staff read and reflected on 4 scenarios representing variations of a theme, all children can learn. We believe that all children can learn and must learn at relatively high levels of achievement. We are confident that with our support and help, students can master challenging academic material, and we expect them to do so. We also believe that we need to work collaboratively with colleagues, students, and parents to achieve this shared purpose. We ended our first PLC with the district reflection partners, and teachers were paired with people in other buildings to promote the sharing of effective instructional strategies across the district. They were encouraged to connect with these partners between this meeting and the next joint PLC, again for the purpose of building upon their strengths.
On January 29th, we were at Greenville Park, and as a lead-up to our joint PLC at Greenville Park, we watched a TED Talk video called The Myth of Average, and we did that all at each of our individual buildings. Todd Rose, a faculty member at Harvard, speaks about the Air Force and how their cockpits were designed for the average pilot. The problem was not one Air Force pilot was actually average. So the cockpit, although average, fit no one. Each pilot has a jagged profile like we all do. We vary in height and weight and in strengths and weaknesses. The Air Force changed their cockpit design to be flexible in order to fit many sizes of pilots. Todd Rose challenged us as teachers to also design to the edges. If we take into account that each child has a jagged learning profile, we can adjust our teaching to help more students reach their learning potential, and we can expand our talent pool. The discussion that came out of watching this video was powerful and set the stage for our second joint PLC. And if you get a chance to see the video, you should. We began with a discussion of three very important words for the PLC: cooperation, coordination, and collaboration. We asked teachers to partner up and discuss the meanings of those three words. When teachers dug deeper and reflected on their PLC work, they found that many PLCs were very good at cooperating and even coordinating various tasks that come along with a PLC. But true collaboration is the goal, and when this occurs, amazing things happen for kids. The collaborative process merges differing views and conflicting ideas that morphs into something that was previously unimaginable. The definitions of those terms are also on your handout. We also talked about the PDSA cycle. We've revisited that, the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. This is a cycle of continuous improvement that gives us feedback, which is what moves us forward. If we stay too long in one stage of the cycle, we will stall out. If we keep the PDSA at the forefront, we will continue to improve by planning, doing, studying, and acting. Teachers use this cycle constantly, almost without knowing it. We plan, and then we try it out, and then we reflect or study what went well, or what needs work, and then we act on it by adjusting and making it better. We see this all the time in core instruction, and especially in our work with interventions. A significant positive change that came along with RTI was our effort to graph or keep track of the progress by keeping data to help us make decisions in our teaching. It informs us to make the best decisions for student learning using this reliable information. Each teacher filled out a half slip of paper on a student in their classroom describing their jagged learning profile. This is a timely connection to the Myth of Average video about the Air Force to their own unique students. Teachers were asked to focus on one student and share his or her learning profile. These students were the topic of discussion as teachers shared ideas and strategies to help one another nurture the individual potential of that student by designing to the edges. RTI coaches have made a conscious effort to think about teachers' own jagged learning profiles. We try to think about how we can design to the edges with our staff development, knowing that teachers also have strengths and weaknesses. We want to help them reach their full potential as teachers. And the last part of our January 29th PLC was all about the doing part of the PDSA cycle. We read the flight story of the Wright brothers, and it helped us think about how hard work and innovation and the belief in themselves helped change the course of history. We encourage teachers to get some planes in the air by thinking about particular students and how perseverance and small adjustments to our teaching can help children reach their potential. Every time we let kids know that we believe they will achieve at high levels, we create optimal learning conditions for flying higher than we ever would have before. On May 7th, our final joint PLC was at Sibley. We spent the first two PLCs working hard to build community and trust. We believe the time spent connecting with people from other schools was invaluable to lead us to our third joint PLC. On May 7th, I would say we really hit our stride. The plan was simple: time for reflection and celebration. We began by allowing 15 minutes for district reflection partners to think back on their year about their professional development. Pat Quinn, Danielle Theis, and her mental health presentation, the use of iPads in the classroom. We gave them time to think about what was particularly powerful and how they may continue to infuse these ideas into their instruction to create optimal student learning. The second part was about celebration of best practices. Teachers were given time to share a particular lesson, strategy, or resource that had a powerful impact on student learning. We asked them to think about success stories and share them with their joint PLC. We did not have enough time for this, and I've heard many stories of how this has continued beyond the designated joint PLC. Technology has made this easier with the use of shared folders and classroom websites. For the most part, grade level teams love this part of the PLC. We know teachers are our best resource, and we want to use this time to capitalize on their strengths.
So then as we look back on our 3 joint PLCs this year, we realized that our focus was to build trust, enhance collaboration, unify the grade levels in the departments, build consistency, and then develop a growth mindset. And we feel we accomplished what we set out to do, yet we feel there's more work to be done.
We hope to build on what we have started with the joint PLC and proposed 3 more joint PLCs for the 2014-15 school year. We hope to continue to share best practices that lead toward improved student achievement. The district-wide collaboration effort feels supportive of teachers in their practice, which in turn is always good for kids, which is our ultimate goal in everything we do. We know that together we can do so much.
Good evening, I'm Rose Turnacliffe. I teach 7th grade English at the middle school, and I'm here tonight to represent all of the language arts writing teachers in grades 6 through 8. That would be Monica Burkhead, Linda Kovach, Rhea Merkins, Sarah Mickelson, and Marilyn Neville, all at the 6th grade level teaching writing. Jan Ensrud, Heather Keel, and myself at 7th grade, and then Ann Jurdy and Jane Dolan at 8th grade. Most of our team members in the past have spent time working on reading, and we decided we were ready for a change, and so we decided to look at the writing standards. This was the 6+1 traits of good writing that the school district adopted quite a few years ago for teaching writing in grades K through 12. We took a look at these traits, and we decided that we would choose the first one that I have listed here, ideas or idea development. We all agreed that many times students were very able to come up with an idea, but they need a lot of practice in developing their initial thoughts in order to communicate a very specific message. Middle school students love to write in generalities, but they don't get to specifics very often. I guess adults do that too. So in order to give you a taste of why we chose this, I grabbed this slide from the Sixth Traits website where they talked about what is idea development. And they say, ideas are the heart of the message. It's the content of the piece, the main theme, together with the details that enrich and develop that theme. So we decided this was a good way for us to begin. We selected we knew we had to make a plan as to how we were going to gather our data, how we were going to figure out what to do with our writers. So we chose a common theme for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and they were going to write a paragraph simply on their favorite place. Teachers were on their own to remind students about whatever parts of the writing process they wanted to introduce. They were to mention that paragraphs have topic sentences and supporting details, and that they have a wrap-up. Students were simply given a piece of paper with the topic at the top of the page, and then they had time to write in class. Paragraphs were gathered in October, and in the meantime, our PLC time was spent trying to determine a common rubric that we might use for our paragraph assessment. After working with that, we had decided that our goal was to try to increase idea development of writing so that 75% of our identified middle school students would demonstrate proficiency as measured by a scaled common rubric by May of 2014. We also spent some time then, we applied for a PLC grant, and we ordered this particular video called Improving Adolescent Writing by Kelly Gallagher. There were 3 parts to this piece, and in addition to watching that, we made up our rubric. In the spring, we realized the flaws that we had in our rubric, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. So we had a scale of 1 to 4, and on that rubric, 3 was proficient. And from the previous slide, when I talked about who our identified targeted audience was, any student that was below a 3, so anybody who scored a 1 or 2 on those paragraphs, and that was going to be our designated identified group that we would follow. So after watching the video and talking about the things that we had learned, we decided that we would teach some pre-writing and before we gave our second paragraph. We shared documents that we had been using in our classroom. We developed some common language as writing teachers. We talked about what did brainstorming look like in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, what was free writing, how did you use a web. We taught what clustering was. And then we gathered our winter sample and applied the same rubric. After the second writing sample, focusing on those pre-writing techniques I just mentioned, 39% of our targeted population demonstrated proficiency in the area of idea development. So from here, we decided to move from pre-writing in the writing process to revising as a way to get students to improve their ideas. We spent a lot of time as individual grades, 6th grade teachers working together, 7th grade teachers working together, and then we would come together as a whole team and talk about, well, if you do this in 6th grade, maybe we should be doing this in 7th grade. And came up with our own lessons then at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade on how to revise. In your board packet then is a copy of the revision page that Jen Ensrud and Heather Keel and I used for the 7th grade, and the 6th grade and the 8th grade used very similar documents. All teachers had practiced the revision process many other times previous to our teaching of this second paragraph sample that we were gathering. So we've done that through the winter into the early spring. And we did our final writing sample then in early May. And our final SMART goal results came out like this. After the third writing sample focusing on revision, 54% of the targeted population demonstrated proficiency in idea development. Proficiency, as I said, was a score of 3 in the rubric, and that means that our targeted audience, which is about 10% of the total middle school language arts students, about 54% of those students improved. So when we looked at our percentages, we were a little bit disappointed because we didn't reach our 75% goal. And then we realized that if we look at that, over half of our targeted population, which was not proficient at writing the ideas in a clear, succinct way, we were able to take over half of our targeted audience and get them to where we could actually see improvement in their writing. And if we did that at 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade, as we continue then with our 6th graders becoming 7th graders and 7th graders becoming 8th graders, we are certainly hoping that we're making great strides in improving the idea development of our writers. We had some additional observations. Obviously, writing is not a science. We needed to make some changes in our rubrics. We had lots of, I guess we call it collaboration. It was a lot of discussing about, did we really want to have a goal that was proficient? A lot of the 6th grade teachers said, well, the kids were proficient when they wrote in the winter time. We wanted to see progress, and so we had a lot of discussion about if they're proficient, they're proficient. And are we working towards a moving target if we change what that is? So lots of great discussion that we had about that. You know, what was a 2? What was a 2.5? What was a 3? People had tried to put some other numbers in there other than the numbers 2 and 3. So as writing teachers, we truly are focused in the classroom on improvement and growth in writing ability, so we will take that into consideration when we work on this next year. To my knowledge, this is the very first time that the middle school writing teachers have met as a group of professionals, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We look forward to continuing our current practice of using the 6+1 traits of writing as we teach the writing process to students. In addition, we are now all using consistent language and methods when teaching pre-writing and using our revision techniques. And the piece that we ordered with the PLC grant, we are now passing on to high school teachers because a lot of the content was really geared towards 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade writers. So, Ellen, it's all yours to take with you. Thank you.
We love Kelly Gallagher at the high school, so we'll be fine.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ellen Muha, and I teach English at the high school, which means I teach academic writing, college prep writing, British literature, advanced British literature, English 9, and 1 faithful year of American Lit 10, which we won't talk about. British literature is my thing. And that kind of leads to what happens at the high school in PLCs, especially in the English department, where Bubba is the only one who teaches sports literature, and I'm the only one who teaches British literature or contemporary literature. And so our PLCs sometimes end up being a little bit of a mixed bag too. And so this year we started by taking a look at the state standards as we did our curriculum review. And we decided vocabulary was one of the places where we felt that there was a gap in the way we were presenting the material, and we didn't feel confident that vocabulary was being taught in a consistent way or in any way that we could measure and guarantee. And that was based on a number of things. I teach mostly 11th graders, and our end of the year survey every year, one of the questions I ask is, where did you feel like you weren't prepared for the ACT or SAT? And vocabulary comes up every year, and so I was also pushing for it for that reason. So we took a look at the state standards, and we really saw that there were 3 areas of vocabulary. The domain vocabulary, which are the English words, a lot of those words that Rose was using, the types of writing, words that you would find in the English classroom, and then the literary devices, all the similes and metaphors and all those lovely things you remember from your poetry explications. And then there were also the Greek and Latin roots. And so we decided that we needed to conquer all 3 of those areas. So we kind of started as a full group, and then we divided into subgroups based on 9th grade teachers and 10th grade teachers, and then our 11th and 12th grade teachers. And it ended up with Kathy Hopsing and I being the only 2 left in our 11 and 12 electives, because everybody else also had a 9th grade or 10th grade. So this year it was just the 2 of us going it alone. But it was really useful. Kathy and I started by just talking about the fact that the students, we think, sometimes forget that there is a language of the English classroom. And you can see we have a list of all of the words we compiled, the terms that we compiled that we gave to you. And I always, with the students, I use the analogy, again, of Bubba Sullivan being on the football field and saying, you know, we're going to line up at that center liney thingy, and then you guys who catch the ball, you go over there. They would laugh him off the field if he didn't know the terminology of football. In the chemistry classroom, they don't call it the flamey doohick and the glass thing. They have terms that they use. But yet in the English classroom, very often the students will say, you know, well, it's what the sentence is about, or it's like the main thing I'm trying to say in my essay. And so getting them to understand that domain words in the English classroom will help us communicate as English scholars. And so that's kind of the starting point that Kathy and I went from. And you can see our SMART goal. We're either really, really bad at math, or we think very highly of ourselves, because both of those might be true. We decided that we would demonstrate mastery, our students would demonstrate mastery at the level of 90% of some of those terms. And we had that high expectation based on what we thought were some really accurate pre-tests that we had given in the past, and the fact that, you know, they're going to start at about 75%, and we can get them up to 90. Well, when Kathy gave her first pretest in her academic writing class, 0. The average score was an F. And so she said, when we thought, oh, that might have been a really high hope. But we stuck with it and continued on. So this was for first semester. That's the other thing about the 11th and 12th grade electives. We have new kids every semester, unless they're in my advanced British literature course or in AP world literature. They take a different course every semester. So our kids kind of turn over. So this was our first semester SMART goal, and then you can look at, by the end of first semester, became by the end of the semester for our second semester, because it really ended up being a fabulous goal. We learned so much. Our teaching changed, the way we presented materials changed, and the students were very successful. So I'll tell you a little bit about our process here. So the first thing we did was compile that massive list, and this caused us to have some great conversations and to visit the other teachers and find out what are the terms. And it seems like we compile that list every year of the literary terms and all of those words, but they're all kind of all over the place. And so this was the first time that we gathered everything all together. Then we started thinking about, well, how are we going to get this across? We started with pre-tests, and then we needed a logging system, so we created a nice little Excel sheet with the terms across the top and the students' names across the side. And as my students would hand in writing assignments, and I would conference with them, I would ask them questions, and after having taught all of the terms and reviewed all of the terms, and if they were using the words correctly, I'd just check off who was getting it and who wasn't. So part of it was just conversationally, if they could use the words. They also had straight up vocabulary tests that we used all sorts of different introductory methods for those ACT frequently used words, and those we used things from Quizlet apps on their iPads to using the words. Having the opening beach class in academic writing began with using something from the vocabulary list that week. Very purposeful teaching of vocabulary, not just you go off and memorize it and you're going to have a test on Friday type of vocabulary, which is one of the methods that had been used in the past in some of those classes. So a lot of our PLC was spent talking about strategies that were working, looking at the test results. I tried this strategy and this is how the quiz came back. In conversation, this many kids are improving, and it's become, these are words that have become a part of our classroom. We created posters, all sorts of things came out of that. And it really ended up being pretty powerful. As we kind of progressed through, we realized that we could move very easily into that, from the literary terms into the domain vocabulary, and so then that became more of our focus because it is also part of those state standards. So that's what we focused on for second semester. And so it was the same kind of system that was in place. We logged and had all the results, and today we did our final compilation, and I can give you, again, math took us a long time today. We ended up with a whopping, it was kind of an amazing thing. In British literature, 92% of my students were at the 90% level. In academic writing, it was 87% of the students were at the 90% level, with 9% close behind at the 80% level. And in Kathy's classes, she found similar results, and her greatest success came from fiction and nonfiction writing. And traditionally, those two classes are the classes that the students take that are struggling a little bit more with English. And that was our area of greatest growth, and so we were really pleased with the system. We will continue it. Our goal for the summer, the two of us, is to create shareable spreadsheets that the other teachers can use. Right now, we've kind of sporadically, hit or miss, talked to them about our success and the strategies we've used. And some people, I know Michelle Bauer has taken on some of them for her academic writing class when I've shared them with her. So that will be how we move forward, just looking at new ways to implement the things that have become now a part of what we do every day. So thank you again. Thanks for letting us tell our stories, and thanks for supporting the PLCs. I can say it's been a really good year of PLCs for us at the high school.
Do you have a denouement for that? Just checking. I'm checking on my literary terms.
Board members, questions or comments? Carrie?
Thank you all. This was really, really excellent. The thing that and Ellen touched on this a little bit, but the thing that I'm really wondering about is how do we archive best practices and strategies, and how do we make sure that everybody is accessing that? Do you get like the little alert in your email box, hey, neat idea for teaching this, or, without burying people in great ideas. But it seems to me that's the
really the key thing about PLCs is making sure that the wonderful work that two people are doing together gets disseminated to a larger group of people. So I don't know who wants to speak to that.
I'll jump right back. That's exactly always with us, is finding the time to have that group meeting. Right now we have shared folders at the high school, and that's where we share everything, and then those emails do go out, and there's a lot of talking between classes, and collaborating on the fly is one of the things that we get really good at doing. But I know this was my first year teaching academic writing, and it was assigned to me really late in the summer. And so in 1 month, I went to that shared folder, and I had everything that the other teachers had ever done in academic writing. And so it was a matter of going through there and kind of picking and choosing the things that I felt comfortable with first, and talking to them, and a lot of shared time, after school and before school. But that is the kind of the joy of PLCs, is that we all found our own niche. But again, where we all teach the electives, we all have many hats, and so you kind of have to jump between the PLCs to find your people. And I think that's why this year for us, the 9th grade teachers all got together, and the 10th grade teachers all got together. And then there are 3 people who teach both 9th or 10th grade and 11, 12 electives. So we did end up sharing that way. But yeah, sharing a lot of emails go back and forth, and so lots of high fives in the halls when things work well too. So
Thank you. Can somebody speak to well, Rose, you have
I
to
just wanted to say, I think that's part of the point of PLC, is to be able to have those conversations. And every team has a list of essential learnings in their folders. And so that's where some of the ideas are communicated. And like at the middle school in 7th grade, language arts, for example, we not only have the essential learnings, but we also have some of the techniques that we use. And our 2 8th grade teachers have been new within the last couple of years, so that was a big part of the process to get those teachers on board. So part of it is just our technology and being able to use that, and then what works with some kids doesn't work with others. And of course now with the iPads, that brought in a whole new idea of what's going to be an effective teaching strategy. So I think the elementary one.
Well, I just want to say that's why we felt so strongly about the joint PLCs, is because we know there are so many incredible things going on in every building, in every classroom, and this was a venue in our 3rd PLC to share. And I was a facilitator of the 1st grade joint PLC, and there was tons of sharing going on. We ran out of time, and a week or so later I got a huge electronic file from the person that was sharing a really great math idea that I know all 1st grade teachers are dying to implement. So.
Okay, thank you.
We're trying to get better at it. I mean, as RTI coaches, we've set some goals for next year about essential learnings and common pacing and, getting better at.
I'm just thinking especially, about, the student who has a lot of challenges, and, that might be the child that comes along once every 5 years, but someone has had success with someone who has that kind of challenge. And how do you archive that so people can find that and say, aha, that's the thing that might work,
Well, that's also something we worked on a couple of weeks ago. RTI coaches, we're all kind of keeping track of kind of an intervention history of those kids who have been receiving interventions over the years. And we were kind of all doing it in our same way, but we have streamlined it, and we think we've come up with a great way to log all of those things that especially our kids who have challenges have had, what support they've gotten, and that's another goal for us this year, to get better at that record keeping of that.
So, thank you.
Yep.
Ann?
I just have one other comment for both groups. These presentations were so clear. I knew exactly what you're doing, and it just getting across your goals, your SMART goals, and how you did it was really well presented by both of your groups. It makes it really easy for us to imagine what's going on. So thank you.
Rob?
I was interested because we started out with Diane and Becky talking about meeting with all the second grade teachers, and then Rose talking about meeting with 6th, 7th, and 8th. And I'm interested in sort of how you could develop this to be not only about sort of all people doing the same thing, but developing it over time so that you have you can use the PLCs to work on the transitions from, say, 5th to 6th grade, or from 8th to 9th grade, and because a lot of those literary terms that Ellen was talking about, you could, you know, if you had a sort of cohesive curriculum where you were introducing those earlier, you wouldn't have to be, you know, filling that all in high school. So it seems like that it could be just, if it's just the language arts teachers in middle school, that's not really broadening it out to help through the whole career of the student.
When language arts met 2 and 3 years ago as a committee, we actually took Greek and Latin roots and assigned them grades 6 through 12, so that we're teaching, I think it's about 10 or so at each grade level. So we're in the process of doing that. It just hasn't gotten to all of those kids yet. And we did the same thing with academic terms. So I have about 15 academic terms like author's purpose or theme or conflict that I'm responsible for. So eventually we'll get there. It's amazing how we all sit as 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers. I taught that, I taught that, I taught that. Well, the kids act like they've never heard it.
Yeah.
But that's the joy about 7th grade, I think, especially because in 7th grade is the first time kids they now have an English teacher, excuse me, not a reading teacher and a writing teacher. And so that's a big transition from that 6th grade to 7th grade, and being able to recognize that reading and writing go hand in hand, and that by teaching writing skills, we're also improving reading skills at the same time. I think that we've made a lot of progress, but you're right, we have a long ways to go with some of those kids, and they need to hear it more than one time. And it changes. It means something different in 7th grade than it does in a 12th grade British Lit class.
Well, it's good to know that those conversations are going on, and it's great.
Okay. Julie?
I just had a comment as well, and I just think it's amazing that, and really powerful that you're spending so much time with the writing piece. So I have a question for Rose. I mean, it truly is amazing, because my husband in corporate America is absolutely astounded when he discovers how few are really good writers. And when my daughter was in 11th grade taking academic writing from Michelle Bauer, she had done a PowerPoint presentation for parents, just talking about probably a lot of things that came out of PLC in terms of focused on writing. And he actually asked her for copies of that he was going to share with his staff, because he said, it's crazy, I get this stuff and I'm editing, and I think we cannot underestimate the power of really making our students good writers. So I applaud you guys for taking that on as your SMART goal this year. I had a question. So when you were talking about the identified group,
Correct.
And you said that was about 10% of the middle school.
Right.
students.
So I have 132 students, and I had about between 12 and 15 students that I was monitoring. So all the classes wrote the paragraphs. All the students wrote the paragraphs. I was in particularly looking for those 12 to 15 students and following those from their first writing sample to their second and then to their third. Okay. So really, when you think about it, we have 90% of our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are proficient at idea development in a paragraph. So we were really focusing on the 10% that are weaker, and we also chose students that did not have some kind of help from another adult in the building with a writing disability. So if they had a special ed teacher, or were in a program where they got some extra help, we did not put those people in our group. So that was our targeted group.
Okay. So did you find that 10% was pretty much across all the grades, or was there one skewed heavily towards one?
We were
grade?
amazed because we didn't know, because we were all afraid, oh, I'll be the teacher that has the pile of papers that have, and it was pretty even. It was really pretty even. And it was even through all of the 6th grade teachers, and it was even 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Okay, interesting. Now, the other 90%, were they continually challenged those that, if the rubric, did it go up to 3 or was it 4?
Well, the kids never actually saw the rubric that we used for this writing sample. This writing sample was not a part of any of our curriculum. All of our curriculum was independent of the writing sample. We only used this. But we used those techniques in all of the writing that we did. So from the first sample to the second sample, they maybe wrote 3 or 4 different times on other assignments practicing those same things.
Okay.
So the kids themselves never had any idea that they were a part of this little guinea pig experiment.
Well, and it will be, you know, to Rob's point as well, it'll be so interesting when Ellen and those in the high school, when these kids start coming through, what differences that they will see. And I think, Becky, you kind of alluded to it as well. It's you guys as veteran teachers being on board with the, you know, the implementation of PLC and where you've seen it, continue to progress is just really amazing.
Writing is a challenge because we don't have a test that tells you that you've improved this or that you can change that. And even amongst ourselves, our ideas about what's a great way to develop that idea. We had lots of discussions. Well, would you give this a 2? I'd give this a 2. Well, I'd give it a 3 because of this. And so we had a lot of conversation. And if that happened in 1 year, what could happen if we continued that for another year and really got to work with some of those same kids? Because now we've got a list of those kids to know who to follow into the next grade as well, to speak to your point about taking those great techniques with those kids that when they work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. First, a comment that I know that our students had their first day of summer today, and you all didn't, and you're here this evening, so I want to thank you so much for the report on your last day of work. 2 questions. One is probably a Mary question on evidence of practice. And then the other is having to do with the sharing, and I guess it applies to all 3. There was an article in the Star Tribune about how the Minneapolis schools are trying to teach the standards in different ways and are feeling kind of some failure on it. And I'm wondering, we look like we have a very different approach. And I don't know which secondary or elementary is better positioned to speak to what we're doing here. It seems very different in terms of how we're addressing the standards and how you're sharing across the teams. And I'm assuming it's more successful because you all seem very positive versus what we were reading about in the Minneapolis schools. I don't know if anyone can address.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that article.
Does anyone know what I'm talking about? It was.
I can talk about both.
Okay. Yeah.
No, we don't do that. I think that our approach to the standards, I know at the high school, we've looked at the standards as not something, not rules that are any different than what we've been doing. When we went through the standards, remember when we went through the standards? Everything lined up. You know, there was nothing, and really it was Greek and Latin roots. That was truly the one thing that we went, oh my gosh, we don't do that. We don't do that well. We addressed that right away. We talked about making fancy posters that progressively had more roots on them, so the seniors would be. But you know, that was really the way we looked at it. So we looked more at what are we doing to get to those understandings. Instead of creating new curriculum, we looked at what are we currently doing, and then how can we make sure that we're assessing that the students are actually getting that. I think that was the take. Instead of these standards are causing us to have to create brand new curriculum, something that, you know, we're going to butt heads and it's new books and new this. But, you know, truly the only thing, as the British literature teacher, the Native American requirement for 11th grade became a bit of a challenge for me. But we did find out that that was okay, and we do it in 10th grade, and that's all right. But there weren't, I don't think we ever approached this saying it's us against them. These standards are things that are ridiculous in terms of what we are doing, but it was more saying, how are we getting the kids there and looking at best practice instead of looking at that final outcome. That certainly seems to be the way we approach it, and I can't speak to the other groups, but that's, and our high school teams, that's what we did.
I should probably get up because I haven't for a while, but it brings me back to the PDSA cycle that Becky was referring to. You know, the plan, do, study, act, and constantly being in motion. And I love how you remember, don't get stuck in one part of that cycle for too long. But also, and Ellen spoke to it, it's come up so often at the elementary as well, of Greek and Latin roots too. And we want to bring it up, and teachers are, and at a very young age, in a very simple, natural way, we want to get to the same thing that Ellen is saying at the high school. So it will be great down the road as we all see the benefits of the early interventions, but constant collaboration and the conversations and the time to have these conversations. So having the opportunity to have a PLC time has really benefited. And sometimes we do have to do cross grouping. So if we have our little group, you know, the little third grade group at Greenville and our fourth grade group at Greenville and, you know, this group at each school, bringing them together once in a while is great because you grow from each other's ideas. And even on committees, like Language Arts Committee, you have K-12 members and you get to blend that way and learn and grow from each other. So collaboration is huge.
Thanks. And then my second question was the evidence of practice documents.
Correct.
So do the PLCs then go back and use those into the following year, or is that just more for you to have kind of a high-level synthesis of what people are doing?
It's a closure for them, and yes, they can continue their goal the next year, but it is designed to be a closure and a reflection upon the past year. The SMART goal, how did they do, what did they change, what will they continue doing, what will they stop doing, and then of course it's going, the PLCs and the SMART goals and the evidence of practice will be tied to the teacher evaluation system that's going into place next year too. So hopefully it's all going to work together. We're not adding things to teachers' plates.
Okay.
We're just allowing that to happen naturally.
Good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the time.
Oh, Julie's got a follow-up.
I just had one quick question, Mary, for you.
Oh, sure.
The DCSDC small grant, the $6,000 a year, does that typically cover what teachers are requesting for their PLC?
Usually. We've refined the process for next year. We're going to divide it into $3,000 each semester. This year, if we had approved everything, we would have been like $200 in the hole. So the last grant, we said, we're out of money, and it happened to be a book for book studies. So we said, apply in September, and they will do that. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the time.
Well, thank you again. Do you have a few comments?
Just again, thank all of you for coming tonight. Again, appreciate that after the last day of school.
And one who's retired too.
And even having a retiree among us. So. But I think that the important thing that you've heard from all of these people tonight is the power of collaboration, the power of having time set aside each week that they can actually work to this piece, the ability to continue to modify and adjust and tweak and change the process to make it more effective. The concept of doing now the level PLCs across the elementary, really thinking about how do we reach across multiple PLCs so that we get the cross-pollinization, I think is an extremely important piece. Tonight, what we tried to do for you is instead of doing what we had been doing the last couple of years, where we had given you kind of individual snippets of a PLC once a month over the course of the 9-month period, the concept here was to try to give you a broader overview, but also bore down and take a look at some very specific PLC work, and really appreciate the sharing about those pieces, because I think when board members want to think about what's the impact here, you have stories. You are able to talk about what happened at the middle school in terms of the writing process, what happened at the high school in terms of the writing process, what happened in terms of when all the first grade teachers came together, all the second grade teachers came together. And I think that's important for us as we go forward. I think the final thing is what you heard is this is something that is never going to be a finished product. I don't want it to ever be a finished product. I want this to be a continual growth model, and I think That's exactly what we're seeing happen. We're seeing the more people work with this, the more they see what are the other ways that we can put this together, what are the other things that we can do that make it even better. And we're seeing the power of technology in terms of the ability to catalog and maintain and have those materials to use not only for the year, but for the future. So really appreciate all of the work of everybody that's here tonight, and Mary for leading this crew, and for all of you for being here to present. So thank you.
Thank you. I was thinking about Mr. Coudray 6 years ago when this came up before the board for a vote. He said that he envisioned it transforming collaboration in ways that we couldn't imagine.
I think he was right.
We heard that tonight. So, yeah.
I wouldn't want to say that to him in public. I don't want him to get a big head, but I think that's exactly right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we have another big item on the agenda. Next is our demographic and housing unit study.
Matt, do you want to give just a brief intro for Hazel?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We just are honored to have Hazel Reinhardt with us here this evening from Hazel Reinhardt Consulting. And you'll remember this journey started probably back in December when we started talking about a handful of items, including all-day kindergarten and also some of the other changes that we had to make for this coming year. And we talked about two pieces. We talked about the piece around looking forward from a position of strength of who we are now and who we think will be down the road and up to a decade, because we thought that kind of professional study and that data would be very helpful in making strategic decisions as we move forward. You all know the second part of that is the facility study that we also commissioned. And I would also like just to recognize Mark Hayes, who's sitting over here from ATS&R. And Mark will be back in, we think, July or the first meeting in August, one of those two, to follow up from Hazel, because he's using Hazel's data in addition to detailed walkthroughs that he's had through our school buildings to help prepare a facilities plan for us. So you're seeing the realization of what you directed us to do a few months ago. And Hazel's going to share some very interesting information with you this evening about Northfield, about the Northfield schools, who we are, and who we are going to become. So, Hazel?
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is about the third time I've taken a look at the Northfield Public Schools. And I didn't go back and look at past studies, but I think there's kind of a common theme, if my memory is right, and that is there's always a sense in this community that there's going to be growth, and the public school numbers never show it. I think I have some insight now based on housing of why that happens, but let's take a look at this most recent study. This is an abbreviated presentation, and I'll try not to take all night because I get very enthusiastic about it, and my enthusiasm may well surpass other people's appetites for it. First of all, a broad summary here. If we look at the past 10 years, enrollment in the Northfield Public Schools decreased by minus 9 students. So essentially, over that period, it was flat. Okay? And the reason it was flat is that an increasing number of district residents are attending the charter school or open enrolling out of the district. Now, I want to make it very clear that open enrollment into the district is larger than open enrollment out of the district. It is the charter school that has made the biggest difference. But my point is that both of these, over the 10-year period, both of these factors have attracted more students. And then, well, the picture is a little mixed because the last couple of years trended downward a little bit, which may or may not be real. You don't know. The only numbers in this, in some ways, that one can have absolute confidence in are the numbers from the public school. And there are a dozen ways to define enrollment there, and the day you look at it and so on and so forth. But when you look at numbers from non-public schools or other schools that are not required to keep records as public schools are, data moves around from year to year, and you can't say that it necessarily reflects reality. Just not certain. But it looks like the district school population was up, I would say, very modestly. Just up a little bit. So that's what happened in the past 10 years. When we look forward now, the first 5 years of the projections are based on actual births, children who have been born. The second 10 years, at least at the elementary school, are all based on assumptions about how many kids are going to be born and how many are going to be in kindergarten 5 and 6 years later. Obviously, in the second 10 years, the elementary students will have moved into the middle school grades in the second 10 years, and at the high school, most of those children are in the system today. But, so we want to keep that in mind. So, and especially because I'm dealing with some data abnormalities that I am struggling with a little bit, but it looks clearly that K-5 enrollment will be down in the next 5 years. Down because of lower births. And this Great Recession that we had took an enormous toll on births. So that, and it's not only in this school district, it's in the state and it's in the nation. So I mean, there just aren't kids to come from somewhere else, is my point. Everything is down. In the second 5 years of the projection, I think the elementary will have some recovery. And as you'll see, I don't know that it'll get back to where it is, but we should have some recovery because of the size of the age groups that will come into childbearing years. The middle school enrollment is projected to increase in the next 5 years, but then decrease as those lower elementary grades flow in. And the high school enrollment projected to increase throughout this time. Okay? Now, in terms of housing, I've looked at 2 methods, and since I was last here, this housing, I've really refined it a lot, and there's some really interesting stuff that can come out of that. But as we look toward the future, my experience is that most local officials really never think of more than 2 to 3 years in advance in their planning. That if you ask them to think about 10, they kind of get frozen and don't have a lot to say. So we're looking at a short time frame, and more things could happen. But in that short time frame, there are an additional 88 single-family detached units, and it is single-family detached units that yield school-age children. Don't get yourself focused on townhomes, apartments. There are very few school-age kids in them. So it's those single-family detached units. So there are 88 projected, which is relatively modest, given that you have a base of over 10,000 housing units. I mean, it's just not many in that huge base. I think what's more important for you to keep in mind is that nearly 47% of your single-family detached units have at least one person age 55 or older. So if we looked at districts, and I must say, I pretty much consider you a metro area district. You have characteristics more similar to metro area districts than I see in some other more rural or more distant districts from, you know, the big hub of the metro area. And that 47% is getting up there, so to speak. And so that means that, you know, if you took out these college kids, which inflate your census numbers and make you look like a young community, you are essentially an older community and continuing to age. And we know that older people don't have kids, and while more and more older people are raising their grandchildren, it is still a very small percentage. And then the other thing that is characteristic here is that the public school yield per that single family detached unit is low. Now, it is not lower than other districts in the metro area, but it's not like the suburban districts of Lakeville or the like. It's more like the West St. Paul, St. Louis Park, those inner ring suburbs also have these same kind of characteristics, and they're also aging populations. So you start out with not very high yield, and then you don't have much new development because everywhere in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, where I have worked, it is brand new units that produce school-age kids. So, that's the issue here. We take a look and you can see how flat enrollment was. I analyze it like any demographer would. You add people, we call it natural increase, decrease, by how the size of the incoming kindergarten class compared to the previous year's grade 12. These are negative numbers, and they're negative numbers in part. This is artificial because you have an inflow in at the 6th grade or 7th grade here at the middle school, and then again at the high school, so that you have more kids graduating from high school than you had starting out at the kindergarten. So that affects these numbers. But if you'll notice, from 2011 to 2012, that was a -11, and now it jumped up to again a -91, which those numbers vary, bounce around a bit. And the net migration is also a bit artificial because it doesn't represent people moving into the district. It represents this inflow of kids who are already present in the district, moving from the charter school or non-public school into the Northfield Public School. So it doesn't tell us particularly what we would like to tell us, but look at the last 4 or 5 years. The numbers have been relatively stable recently in that net migration in, compared to the wild sort of bouncing around prior to that. If we look at how Northfield Public Schools compare with the state for education choices, and for reasons that are a mystery to me, the State Department can't seem to get more recent data put together. And I called them and they told me what I might do to do it, and I thought, if you can spend the time to tell me how I should put it together, you could do it in that amount of time. I probably shouldn't be so candid, but anyway, what you see here is that a much smaller percentage of your resident students in the district attend a non-public school. Smaller in the traditional non-public school, a little higher percentage in the homeschool, but basically, overall, much less than statewide. In the public options, 7% of your student body are non-residents to this district, and about 3.8% of your resident students open enroll out. But about evens out, I suppose. Compared to statewide. Charter schools, you see you have a higher percentage, 5.9 versus 4.1. Overall, however, you have a little higher capture rate of what we think would be the overall number of students you could take than statewide. And that 81% is kind of, again, pretty typical metro area percentage. Here's your enrollment. There are 2 things that I look at here. One, when we look at migration, see we follow the grade as it progresses through time. But I always like to look at what's happening at kindergarten. And you see in the 10-year period, we have this is the same, then it bounces up, comes down, then it's back down to where it was, then it's up a little bit, back down, up a little bit, up a little more, back down, now less than it was here, similar to what it was in some of these others. So it's moved around. The trend basically is it's not going up. Okay? The other key thing is to look at this last column here. And what we can see here is that we have fewer kids here than we have here, which we would expect because we know we have an inflow. But as we parse this down here, we can basically see that we have fewer students on average in those elementary grades than we have in the others. And that's kind of a predictor that enrollment is going to go down unless more students move into the district or fewer choose alternative choices. And here what I do is just, it looks, on the average, this is simply taking those grades and adding them up and dividing, so it is a true average. 269 students is the average K-5, 304, 6 to 8, and 307, 9 to 12. And what is interesting about this school district, we'll see it later, is the inflow is at middle school, not at high school. And this distribution suggests that enrollment will continue to decrease if kindergarten remains near its current level. We have to have a real kick-up in kindergarten. Now, births. What I'm showing you here are calendar years, and they are resident live births. And there's those words have particular meaning. Resident means that on the birth certificate, the mother said she gave her address and the place it was, and the county was Rice, and the state was Minnesota, and the city, and I'm showing you Northfield here. Later we'll look at the Northfield School District. And you can see here how we had in 2007, we had the largest number of births in the state of Minnesota and in the nation since 1964. However, in Minnesota, this number was much, much smaller than it was in 1964. So even though it's a larger number, it's still small by comparison, but you can see what's happened since. Okay? Rice County, on the other hand, peaked out in 2006, not 7. And if you look at this, basically births are higher than they were early on. The city of Northfield, however, went up, but now this number is not that different from this one. About 10, 13 births. So what this tells me is the births in Rice County are occurring somewhere other than in the city of Northfield. Okay. Now I move on, and by special request from the Minnesota Department of Health, they will provide people like us birth data by address, and then we geocode them to the school district. Now there's one caveat. In the numbers you saw in the prior table, every birth is included. In these numbers, births of children born out of wedlock, the parents have the option of not withholding that from that address file. So you can't get that birth with the address attached. And that adds some additional layers of where things can not trend as well, maybe. And I became very suspicious here, and I've had it checked 3 times, been back to the health department, they get tired of me. But you'll see, these numbers right down here. Now, in your projections, I corrected for that. I said, I don't believe those numbers. I think that some hospital made an arbitrary decision not to include those births and didn't ask the parent or something, because that's just such a dramatic decline. But what we see here basically is that, and these now are adjusted to the school year for September 1st, so they don't quite, but you can see here, look at this, we had in 2006-07, which was the big year for births, we had it up. And now it goes down, up, and then we get this downward, then 127, 145. I mean, just very low. So before we do projections, I think it's important to look at what's basically happening in the world at large. Well, The population is aging. That's something we don't really, people have great difficulty. You say, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? And they kind of see themselves where they are today, unless they have very grand plans. But we have a hard time rolling ourselves forward in time. But we do know that there will be less mobility because older people move less frequently than younger people. The greatest probability of our changing our address occurs between the ages of 18 and about 34. And after that, we don't move very much. We are going to have a decrease in the school-age population per household, and most significantly for school districts, I think that it just means increasing transportation costs. And for parents, it means even more play dates, because you don't have kids in the neighborhood. You have to drive rather where there are the kids. We're going to have a shift in the size of the adult age groups, which will probably result in less demand for single-family detached housing, because we're going to have, it's estimated that 60% of the increase in the adult population will occur in the population 65 years of age. So, and my point in all this is, don't look at the past decade in the roaring days of housing and think that that's going to bounce back and we're going to see that carrying on. No, because we're entering into a different era. We do expect more bursts this decade, meaning running up, let's say 2015, 17 to 20, and especially 2020, 21, 22, as we move into that later time frame, largely because of that large Gen Y or millennial population. And they will be in their prime childbearing years, and we do expect more births. And that will result in another enrollment cycle, the third, when we will see rising elementary enrollments initially, and then rising secondary, and we would expect another very large class of high school students to graduate somewhere 2040, 2042. Now, just to put that in perspective, the largest ever number of high school graduates graduating occurred in 1978 in Minnesota at the height of the baby boom. The second largest was the spring of 2009, and it was substantially fewer, but it's the second one. So we're saying that it will trend down, then we'll get a little upswing again in the 2040s. Probably not many of you will plan to be on the school board to see that. I probably won't be alive.
Not going to be here.
I resemble that comment.
Me too.
So my point is to have us understand we're looking out into a future that we probably won't personally see. Now I'm going to project enrollment via two methodologies. The cohort survival is a very traditional way of projecting population, and its advantages is that we have projections by grade. It reflects the recent burst and the current grade sizes. And that's especially important when you look at individual schools, because you can have larger grades, classes in certain grades, and smaller, and that will affect it. However, it's difficult to calibrate your survival rates to reflect the additional housing units, especially if there are a large number of units. So that, great strengths to this method, but some weakness. Okay, so the biggest challenge when we start out with cohort survival is to get a fix on what we want to project kindergarten to be. And I'm looking here now at the district pool numbers that we saw earlier. See these low ones here? I've adjusted them back up so that they are in ratio with the city of Northfield for what they were in this period of time. Okay. But these percentages move a lot, which tells me that even though you have competition here, basically you have a relatively high percentage of students who enroll in kindergarten who were not born in this district. Now the last few years here, well, about here, bounces around some, but this is a whole different era up here. So we're looking at this, still a little more than I might like, but that's what it is. But you can see now, based on this, we can project kindergarten class to 2018-19. In kindergarten assumptions, I made the assumption that the low would be 110%, and that's based on an average of a certain number of years, and a high at 112%. And then for the last 5 projection years, I patterned it after the state demographer's projections for Rice County births, which happened that were not projected particularly accurately because the births are currently 21.5% below what was projected. So I adjusted for that, and then the Northfield Public Schools are about 29% of Rice County births. So that's how I got into the births for the last 5 years. And here are the kindergarten projections. You see the 235, which was the 2013-14, the fall enrollment. And then at 110% of that pool that we saw in those previous tables, this is what kindergarten would look like, and at 112%. Not a big difference, but some difference, and we see it makes a difference of about 40 students over time. But these, over the 10-year projection period, we have fewer kindergarten students projected than we had in the previous 10 years of the past. So that tells us a great deal about why enrollment is likely to trend downward. If we look at this net migration number, what makes Northfield somewhat unique, I don't know what happened here, but a lot of kids found their way into elementary school that weren't there the previous year. But you see, you have your big increase here. And that's the flow in. And then you get some of these small years versus some of these huge ones. So this tells me that there's a core of students that are obviously here throughout, but there are a fair number of students that are rotating in and out of this district. There's mobility going on at a fairly high level. This shows us what happens from grade to grade. And you can see you don't have a lot of kids, there's a couple of these outliers here, but you don't have a huge movement from kindergarten to first grade, which suggests that you didn't have a lot of students who were attending some kindergarten alternative, Montessori school, a church nursery school or something, staying there. Again, these numbers tell me there's turnover, there's mobility that's going on. But then see, here you see from grade 5 entering into grade 6, pretty substantial number, except I don't know what happened here, what they decided to do, or there weren't many of them. And that on average, these numbers are much larger than the numbers of students in high school. So, and then you see we have these numbers we've seen here. So I'm now looking for survival rates, which is a way of combining both the movement and the very low probability of death in the school-age population. The past 10 years produces the lowest projection. The past 3 years, the highest. And we can see here, for example, that this was, it's 2.4% is the inflow. If the same number of students in kindergarten, the same number, appeared in grade 1, it would be 1.000. So to have 2.4, that's the increase. And you see here it moved to 3.7. Here, this was just a slight loss to just a slight gain. This is basically the same. This had picked up a little. This picked up. This one is down a little, but this picked up quite a bit here. This is about the same. This picked up a little bit. This is essentially the same, and then you picked up here. So you can see where it's occurring. Now, what I'm doing here is sort of pairing or marrying the low kindergarten projection with the low migration, the high kindergarten with the low migration, the low kindergarten with the high, the high with the high. And these are the results. And you can see this is, if, I don't want to say worst case scenario, but if these came out, you'd take a real decline in enrollment versus something here in the higher kindergarten. You have a decline or you have a pretty modest decline over 10 years. What this tells us is that with the assumptions, the migration assumptions made a bigger difference in these numbers than the kindergarten assumptions. So whether we thought it was the average of the past 3 years or the average of the past 10. Now when I take these numbers and look at them as you cluster students by grade and into schools, elementary, middle school, and high school, here's what you see, of course, is that even under the very best, highest projection here, you're down 200 students in 5 years at the elementary level. And then you see we get some bounce back, and we get back to being, if under, again, the highest scenario here, you would be back to within about 100 students. At the middle school, at 9-12, up slightly, and the reason these numbers are the same, no effect of the kindergarten assumptions in the first 5 years, only the migration. And then you see here, this goes down because these lower numbers are moving in. And then at the high school level, up to almost 100 students. And then you see that it goes down a little bit, but you know, all of these are higher than you have in here. Again, I would say that these projections, what they tell us is that there's a powerful price to be paid for these low number of births in school enrollments. You know, I try to keep an eye on what's happening with that. And then, depending again on that net migration, which for you is what's that inflow from non-public and the charter. Because if it remains at the level it's been in the past 2-3 years, then you should get those high migration rates in. Okay, just so you do that. And then I made projections by the elementary schools, and here I use the high kindergarten and high migration assumptions because I want to see the maximum number. Because for physical plant, I've learned over many years, you look at the highest number, and when you deal with money, you usually look at the lowest number. Okay? So we're looking at high here, and I did these again by the cohort survival method, by school and so on and so forth here. And you can see that every one of your buildings, now you might change a attendance boundary and then this is meaningless here, but you have the smallest numerical decline and the smallest percentage decline at Greenville Park. And you're running about, 15% decline, 13% decline at the other two. And then I'm just showing you that these two projections made independently, the sum of these independent building projections is 3 students different than the district-wide projection. So it helps give one some confidence that at least everything is tracking here in the same way, and that you don't have too wild a swing at the individual buildings. Now, you have 88 new single-family detached units anticipated. 84 are in the Sibley attendance area, 4 in the Greenville Park, and none in Bridgewater at this point of reckoning. So now I'm going to go into making these projections via the housing unit method. And this is a little more sophisticated approach to the housing unit method because I'm going to project it based on existing units that had movers, that is, they were turned over, they were sold, and then new units. And we'll see different yields and different rates here. If we look at this, it tells us, see here you see how much different single-family detached is in yield from townhomes or duplex, triplex. And even here, you know, it takes 5 housing units to get one K-5 Northfield public student. So that's the importance of that single-family detached. Now when I look at the, and this we're getting now from the tax records, Rice County and Dakota County tax records here, and we're looking at units and how many of them sold in this period of time. And 7% in Bridgewater, 4.7 and 8.7. Anything over 4% I consider high. So this has been a very brisk housing market. There's been a lot of turnover. This is the kind of the guts of it in the single family detached unit. Here is the yield. These units were in existence pre-2011. And in the Minnesota property tax file, you know the year the unit was built, you know the year that, you know what type of unit it is, whether it's detached, single family attached townhomes, duplex, triplex, all that sort of thing. Plus you know the market value, whatever you know, how accurate you think that may be. But what did I do here? I screwed it up, man.
No problem. So we're here to help you.
That present held the finger on the button too long.
Yep. Click, click.
Yeah. You want that one, then we'll go to the next. Okay. That looks good. But look at these units were existing pre-2011 and they did not sell. I mean, they did not turn over. And this is the kind of yield you have. This is really low, and this is the number of units. Here, these are units that existed pre-2011 and they sold. See the number? And some of them, well, in this period of time, they probably didn't sell more than once, probably just once. And you can see the yield here. This is the same. This went up just a tad, and when you project it, maybe it takes you up one student over a few years. It's not a lot. But if you think about it, you gain just ever so slightly if the unit sells. And then here are new units built in these years, and the number, and look at this, and this. So you can see how important new units are in gaining students. In Greenvale Park, it didn't go up. Well, no, what am I saying? It's up too. But it's not in the realm, but this is starting to get significant if you rolled it over time. So everybody understand how this all works? So I made projections, both methods, and I'm going to compare them now at the school level. Remember that the cohort projections include non-residents. The housing units are for resident only, because if you had to be a resident of the district to be geocoded to an address in the district. And that not all students attend the elementary school in their attendance area, okay? And it varies by attendance area. So attendance area projections, the housing unit method, appear to be lower, but when all adjustments are made, housing unit projections are higher than the cohort projections. And here is the bottom line. So initially, you see this looks just slightly lower. But this has non-residents in it, somewhere 5-7%. So this actually says, yes, those new units, if they come on, will make a difference. Okay? And then here, we can see now we're dealing with both resident, non-resident, but we're dealing with attendance area and all kinds of other things. But what it tells us here is that Greenvale Park has more students in that attendance area that are in the school. Mm-hmm. So that's the area that's helping feed the other two schools at this time. So that's, and this is now only to 2015-16 for the 2 years. So to summarize this, I think that I really have to tell you, you need to anticipate a decline in enrollment at the elementary level. Got to watch those births coming in. And again, a housing unit, and whether I did a project for the city of Northfield and the city of Dundas. Oh, this is now, time slips by me, but it was probably around 2007, somewhere in there.
2008.
Yeah, okay. And at that time, it looked like there would be a lot of growth. Well, obviously, the Great Recession, you know, it was not realized. I don't know whether some of that will come back, how much. Our thinking was different in that era than it is today, so I don't know. But short term, I think you're going to see this downward enrollment at the elementary level. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know that.
Questions? John?
Where is the population growth in this area going to be in? What age group can we expect it? I mean, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, it was clearly retirees moving into this area. What sort of population? Where can we expect to see a population grow, or are we expecting the population of the whole area to stay flat?
No, I think the area will grow. Well, here we come to a whole philosophical thing. There are people who would argue that growth is going to concentrate in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the nearing suburbs. I am not inclined to believe that long term. I think the reason we're seeing it today is because we have a very large population in their 20s and 30s. Young people are delaying marriage, and let's be honest, if you're 28 years old or 30 years old and you hold a professional job, it's probably more exciting to live in uptown or downtown Minneapolis than Northfield or Lakeville or anywhere like that, okay? I see no reason to believe that once people have children, they will not continue in the behavior they have demonstrated for 50-some years or more, and that is to look at places with excellent school districts. I mean, the choice people have is an excellent public school versus having to pay for an expensive private school or not quite as excellent school. So I think that makes school districts with excellent public schools highly desirable to people with school-age children. There is no evidence at this point in time that gasoline is going to be exorbitantly expensive, which makes commuting still a reasonable value for people. I would anticipate there will be some job growth in Rice County. I don't know how much. I mean, that's a whole nother matter to calculate. But the school district's proximity to the metro area, with the Dakota County line being here in the school district, you know, it really is the district itself is really kind of a metro school district, and people move along that line pretty readily. Now, for older people, Northfield is powerfully attractive because you have two very premier colleges here, which means there's a very active cultural, intellectual life here in Northfield, with still a small town community that you can be engaged in. So I mean, those are the pulls that one will see, and these colleges, especially St. Olaf, a school that has produced more people who have probably graduates alums who have stayed in Minnesota than Carleton has on average, that probably remains a very powerful magnet to do things and participate. And more colleges are programming things for their alums or other people because it's one of the ways in which you can attract and solidify contributions from your alums. So that said, it's kind of, I'm saying on one hand this, on one hand the other thing, but I think that it's a community that remains very attractive to older people, but you know, if you maintain a very high quality, high performing public school system, you are and will remain attractive to people with children.
Other questions? I have one, if people are quite ready. So in terms of, there's numbers, but I wondered if you had any ideas on demographics, for instance, poverty. If you had a population that was 70%, you know, free and reduced lunch is one of the measures that we would use, versus a population that's more like a quarter, and that while you have the same number of students, we know there's this poverty gap in terms of learning, so in terms of resources, it changes how we look at things.
To make those projections, in my experience, the definition of who's eligible for free and reduced lunches changes. Mm-hmm. It's you know, it's not a hard and fast line. It's sometimes by how many resources are available, so on and so forth. I've made projections in school districts where everybody gets a free breakfast because, well, they're just doing free breakfast, and anybody who wants to have a free breakfast can have a free breakfast, things like that. To make those projections, there's a very, very high correlation between the free and reduced lunch and race ethnicity. So you really need to make the race ethnicity projection first, and because there's a big correlation there. Now, needless to say, what we're seeing everywhere is increasing racial ethnic diversity, and with it, especially, I would assume here we would see Hispanic population, perhaps, maybe some Somalis. I know a little farther south we have this, and these are immigrant populations. They are disadvantaged English language. They're speaking and like the language, which puts them at a disadvantage. Most immigrants really do sacrifice their first generation to get the leg up. So I would anticipate that you would see the population in need of free and reduced meals and in need of extra support and learning to increase. Can't tell you standing here just what percent, but I would say it's likely to increase, very high probability it will. And to bear in mind that as you go north here, Lakeville is still a very predominantly white non-Hispanic district. But when you get to Burnsville, you have 35% minority. Even as you go east to Rosemont, Apple Valley, Egan, the percentage of non-white population goes up, and in some attendance areas, it's really, you know, substantial as well. So I mean, it's then if you go a little to your west to Shakopee, Shakopee has a fairly large Hispanic population, and it also has a large number of Russian immigrants. So I mean, and the other thing, the kind of housing you have pretty much determines this. I often say to school districts, you cannot be what your housing is not. African Americans, about 50, well, not even 50%, live in single family detached homes. They are primarily renters. Hispanics maybe 50-50, depending how long they've been in the United States. And the Asian population is suburbanizing and becoming homeowners at a very high rate. So, I mean, that's how these things intertwine with each other. Oh, the other thing that people have a misnomer about, we still carry around, those of us of a certain generation, that people have starter houses. There is no such thing as a starter house anymore for young people. Yes, they either are two educated people with good jobs and they buy in advance of where they are, you know, at 28 years old they'll buy a 4 or 5 bedroom house because they probably will have children in a few years. Or you have people who have not done as well, or not as well educated, or they've had great difficulty finding jobs commensurate with their education, and their incomes are modest. But everywhere in this 3-state area of the upper Midwest, more expensive homes yield more public school kids than less expensive homes. And I know that is counterintuitive, but that is what happens. And in here in Minnesota, it isn't until the home is at about 1.5 million that you see a decline in public school yield. I mean, some of the highest yields come out of those houses at 750,000.
And does your data show that there's a greater yield and greater student growth in the Dakota County parts of the district? And is that why you're projecting a
we haven't
higher
looked
yield
at
in
that.
Grenville? No?
I haven't looked at that.
Okay, but you were showing a greater yield per new house in the Greenvale part of the
No,
district?
actually, it was in Bridgewater. In Sibley, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess just anecdotally, I guess in our neighborhood, in the old part of Northfield, the Sibley district part, what we've seen is the houses that have been occupied by families for 40 or 50 years have now been turning over with, you know, groups of with new families with 3 or 4 kids who weren't born in this district but moving in here, but also a lot of them wind up going to the charter schools as well. So,
yeah. And then they're probably going to decide that they need to remodel the house.
Right.
And add something.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, so they took a house that was more modestly priced, and by the time they're finished with it, they've almost doubled its value.
Which price?
You know, so I mean that's what's happening today.
Other questions? Bill?
I'm not sure I know how to answer this question, but let's try. Northfield is significantly attractive to older people moving here. Will that distort the numbers of the statistical numbers of the families who have children in the district? Because it is such a high percentage.
Yeah, if they decide to go into single-family detached, but I would venture to say that more townhouses will be built and maybe even some modest-sized apartment units to attract that older population who want more of a turnkey lifestyle. They don't want to have to deal with the issues of snow removal in the winter and the like, because they may want to spend a month or two in the south. And that, of course, is one of the challenges of that, having a single-family detached home. It doesn't work so well unless you have considerable resources and can have, or you have children who are very willing to check on your property every few days.
One more. From Hazel Reinhardt's, 1990. For the district to grow, the community needs to build about 200 single-family homes. We're not scheduled to do that. Last year we built 150. So now we're at 88.
Well, that's for 2 years,
Yeah.
you know. And see, and why I'm being a bit cautious about this is I don't know whether that 88 implies some pent-up demand, or whether, and then it will drop to 40 or something, or whether that will continue at a higher rate.
I think there's a pent-up demand, but I'm not sure it's necessarily existing within the community. I think pent-up demand is other people wanting to move to the area.
Well, and then one of the challenges for a community like this is whether you have development companies who are willing to spec. Because, you know, to build something only as people come, and that's a long process. People like to have something where maybe they can choose the carpeting and the tile and the like, but it's basically there. So I think, you know, that was what was fascinating about the period pre-2008, because there were some large developers holding tracts of land, and it appeared as they were going to be willing and had the money to do some spec housing, you know, put it up and see who would come. And I don't know whether it's not as robust, but that's what it would take. And then depending on their age, you know, whether the demand will really be for some form of townhome for that population. And what often happens in those kinds of arrangements, and Northfield strikes me as a kind of place that would be ideal for these in terms of cooperatives, because cooperatives work best with highly educated populations. They're attracted to the nature of the cooperative. They have different financial implications. I don't want to get into all of that. But cooperatives are certainly condo situations.
Other questions? Julie?
Well, I had a similar question along the line of Noel's because I love the whole concept of the silver tsunami, right? And it's coming, and
of course we don't want anyone to know how silver it is.
Exactly, and I don't think anybody really understands, you know, the impacts it's going to have in so many areas, and particularly for school districts. So what you're saying is that, as what I've always heard about Northfield, is that we have a larger population of retirees than we do statewide, than the percentage statewide. Yes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do we know what that percentage difference is?
I don't know offhand. Okay.
Because you gave 47% of the single-family homes have one or more at 55. So is that pretty much online, or is that higher?
That's higher.
Yeah. So I think that's a key message, is that if you think about the houses that actually produce kids, we have a larger percentage of those houses that have at least one or more residents in them that are not of childbearing age.
Yeah. Now the good point is they could turn over in the relatively near future. The negative is that there's some interesting research that's been done that says if you don't move by the time you're 80, you are unlikely to move. That is, you will not move until it's assisted living or something like that. So, I mean, there's some key stages that people go through in which they make that decision that I'm going to downsize, I'm going to move to some other place. And there are reasons for that. One, a decision to move is often triggered by the death of one's spouse. Or people say, I still have energy to go through and pitch stuff. And I want to do it rather than leave it for my kids, or for me when I'm 90 and I know I'm not going to have the energy and stamina to do it. And I anecdotally know people who talk like that, said, I have to do it now, I didn't want to leave this, got so much stuff. This is often professional people, they haven't purged their papers, they have lots of books they had for their professional life, shelves and shelves of books, and to try to take care of some of that. So, but there are some really key ages. Now, we could do some more fine-tuning on this. We've used 55, it's a good thing. I have a project right now, both with the Edina School District and the City of Edina, and for the city, we're actually looking at people over 75, people over 85, that sort of thing, as they fine-tune it and provide more services, looking for a variety of things. So there are a number of things you can do with these data. Thank you.
Other questions?
I have just one last piece, Hazel. We talked extensively about the concept of migration and the fact that the situation that we have in this district that is somewhat different is that we have a higher population of students who are choosing to go to a charter school because we have two of them located right inside the system, and that really our only saving grace is that we have a significant number of open enrollees that are coming from other districts.
And the charters do not operate middle schools and high schools.
Well, one does and one doesn't.
Okay.
But one's an elementary, one's a secondary, and we don't necessarily get kids who just naturally move from the elementary charter to the secondary charter, because the group and the kinds of students that really fit are maybe a little bit different.
Right.
I guess the question I have is just simply, have we been able to, as you kind of look at this piece, how difficult is it to really gauge the impact of open enrollees in this whole process, because of the fact that the choices they're not residents, they're not living in the district, they don't necessarily work in the district, they've just chosen to drop their kids here or put their kids in daycare here, and then they arrive at our doors.
Has the district made an effort to attract non-residents?
Not nearly in the way like a Minnetonka or a Hopkins has done,
Okay.
or an Edina has done, where they've gone out and done, we've not done any full-scale kind of campaign to do that.
Well, I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm just saying that those efforts usually make a difference. I say usually because they have to be accompanied by something unique that people really want to avail themselves of. So in some areas, and you've named some of the districts that have reputations of being very aggressive in attracting students from other districts. There are other factors I would submit to you that are involved with that phenomena. School district boundaries, as you know, are not rational, and they're not rational by 2014-15 standards. Those are decisions made probably in the 50s and 60s by many times farmers who were, whatever. Draw the boundary, yeah. So as in the metro area especially, you had school districts that the people who lived there lived in several different municipalities, and so you had this kind of cross-identity of what to identify with. And so one of the key things, I think, in attracting students who are not residents is the extent to which people want to identify with Northfield. Because where your children go to school or where they graduate from high school is a powerful factor of people's identity. And that's why, school districts fight so hard not to merge with another school, because they lose that identity. But those would be things that you might think about. And then the other thing I would suggest is that you analyze where those open enrollees are coming from. How far away are they from your buildings?
Yeah, we have that data both ways, both in and out. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's the kind of thing I would look at.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was fascinating.
Gives Mark a lot to think about, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Hazel.
Thank you.
She said she could go talking to the my job.
All right, we are ready to move on to our items for individual action. And the first item is the 2014-2015 proposed budget. And board members, you have a pretty version of it as well now.
In color with color charts, etc.
And unfortunately, Val Mersdorf, who has done a great job over the last several months sharing each and every individual nook and cranny of these budgets with you. She couldn't be here tonight. She just had a family situation that she's working through, and so Dr. Richardson and I are here to handle any questions that you might have, but you've been provided some great detail, and this is really the culminating piece. As you know, we have a statutory obligation to adopt a budget by June 30th of any year, which is why we go through the process of making sure that we have very detailed presentations in those preceding months. So hopefully we've answered the large majority of your questions up until now.
So this is an item for individual action, and the superintendent's recommendation is to approve the proposed 2014-2015 budget. So before we take questions, I'd like to have a motion and a second.
So moved.
Moved by Julie to support the superintendent's recommendation.
Second.
Seconded by John. Questions? Carrie?
I just want to verify that what we got in our packet is within the pretty version.
Yes.
That's
That's my understanding,
It's
yes.
just prettier and in color.
Yeah.
But
Well, I know what Val likes is, I know she has gotten a number of positive comments, and this goes back before Val. I mean, you have all mentioned how you really enjoy this. You like to be able to have the specific information in your hands when someone asks you a question that's put in a way that seems to be easily accessible.
right. And you know, again, the whole concept of having presented over the last several months, you have heard all of the pieces of the budget. You've had an opportunity to ask questions about each piece. But again, we'd be happy to answer any of the questions you might have to the best of our ability. But I believe you have had a chance to see and talk about each piece of this. This is simply the culmination of putting all those parts together.
Very good. So any follow-up questions? Okay. All right. Well, we have a motion and a second to approve the 2014-2015 budget as has been presented over the last several board meetings. All those in favor of approving the budget say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. The budget is approved. Our next item for individual action is the fiscal year 2014 audit engagement letter.
And again, the information on this, you know, Clifton Larson Allen has been our auditor for a number of years. We're looking at moving forward in terms of engaging them for the audit for the 2013-14 school year. We will have the same principal involved. Craig will continue to serve in that principal role. They will be assigning a new lead auditor to us this year. Lindsay will be, I think, now taking some other jobs that are maybe closer to Mankato.
Exactly.
But the good thing is the fact that, again, Val has that background as a CPA. And if we have any issues with the new lead auditor, I'm sure Val will be able to pick up the phone, call Craig, and say, you know, let's talk about what's going on here.
Well, and as you know, we've had some of our cleanest audits over the last couple of years, and that's a direct result of Val's previous work of auditing school districts. So I anticipate it'll be the same as we move forward this year, even with the new lead auditor.
So there is a superintendent's recommendation to approve the 2013-14 engagement letter. Moved by Noel.
I move it.
Second. Seconded by Ann. Questions? All those in favor of approving the 2013-2014 engagement letters, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next thing we have is a resolution. This is establishing the dates for filing affidavits of candidacy.
Again, Danita has prepared this for you, for your review. Again, this matches all of the established statutes required in terms of the affidavit filing. The period for filing begins on Tuesday, July the 29th, and closes at 5:00 p.m. on Tuesday, August the 12th, 2014. So, again, we are later than the other entities that have primary elections. And so this is an important opportunity for the community to be reminded of the fact that the time period for filing is later than for other openings. And again, it's that 2-week period between the end of July and the 12th of August. And again, describes how that needs to occur, that you need to basically come to the district office, basically that your filing is there, and that there's a $2 filing charge. So nothing new and different from what we've done forever.
Is there a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation?
So moved.
Moved by Julie.
Second.
Seconded by John. Questions? This is a roll call vote.
Fossum?
Aye.
Maple?
Aye.
Richard?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Hardy?
Aye.
Stratmore?
Aye.
And Iverson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. We are ready to move on to the consent grouping, and I'll remind board members that there were some additional personnel items added in the table file.
If I could, I'd request to remove the swim club from the consent agenda, since
Okay.
my family's been significantly involved in that. I'd abstain from acting on that one.
Okay. So we will pull the swim club agreement from the consent grouping. All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping without the swim club agreement?
So moved.
Moved by Carrie. Seconded by Ann. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. So then the next item to approve would be the addendum to the Northfield Swim Club agreement.
So moved.
Moved by Julie. Seconded by Ann. This is not a consent grouping, so do you have any questions? Anything you just because your family's been involved on?
Right.
Okay. All right. So we will have to approve this separately. So all those in favor of approving the swim club agreement, say aye.
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 And John, do you want to
Abstain.
And no opposition? Okay. Motion carries with 6 ayes and 1 abstention. All right. We are ready to move on to our items for information, and we have 3, one added from the table file. Dr. Richardson, do you want to talk about the bullying prevention item?
Sure. In terms of the bullying prevention or prohibition policy, which is Board Policy 514, we have a proposed revision for that policy for your review tonight. Again, you know that was the subject of a significant discussion during the legislative session and approval. The good thing for us is because of the fact that we had already moved to the Ovaeus model in terms of the defining of bullying and the requirements that it had to be a repetition or repeated action, and it had to be either perceived or actual imbalance of power as part of the definition for an act that would be considering bullying. What we find is that our modifications much more closely reflect the revised MSBA model policy. And so our belief is that we can basically use the revised bullying policy that's provided by MSBA. The other major change in terms of the policy, and again, not a major change, but a change that you need to be aware of, is in the area that discusses the reporting process and school district action, which really just makes some modifications from what we had currently had to reflect the statutory requirements that you must begin an investigation within 3 days of being aware of that, and then specifically the process that you must go through once an investigation begins. So what we would like to do is to have you have a chance to take a look at this. If you are hearing any information back from the community about this, to have an opportunity to do some processing over the next 2-week period, and then basically come back, 2 weeks, next month, and when we come back in July, then to approve the revised bullying prohibition policy. The second item that I want to share with you is something that Joel Lear and I have been discussing over the course of the last couple of months, and want to bring to you simply as an item for information. As a school district, we have had a membership in Advanced Ed, which used to be called the North Central Association, for a number of years. What I think is important is a quick history lesson, and that is that the North Central Association really began back around the turn of the 20th century, in about 1905, when we were first beginning to see comprehensive high schools being created in the country. At that point, there was a significant difference in the quality of high schools across various states and within states. And so the North Central Association was really founded to try to put a seal of approval or accreditation on high schools that had a certain level of performance. And the key things that they really measured, they looked at the course offerings that were provided. They looked at the teaching staff, and were they teaching in their subject areas with the appropriate licensure and in their majors. And then the third piece really looked at facilities, because again, at the time, we were beginning to see chemistry labs and industrial technology labs and other kinds of more sophisticated areas, and there was a huge difference again between the quality that we saw across communities and across states. What's happened obviously in the last 100+ years is that we've seen a major shift in terms of what the NCAA accreditation, now Advanced Ed, really means. Because back when it was first in place, and I can remember, I guess, back even in the 60s, where you used to see school districts that would actually put the NCAA seal on the diploma, because the measure there was this denotes a really high quality district. What I think we've seen obviously in the last, especially 15 or 20 years, is that we've seen a huge amount of effort on the part of the federal and state government to really standardize and to quantify the performance of high schools and to identify how they operate. So we've seen state-mandated teacher and principal evaluation. We've seen the engagement pieces that we're looking at. We've seen state-mandated assessments and reporting in grades 3 through 12. We've seen state-sponsored report cards. We've seen basically the school improvement planning process, professional learning communities, and we've also seen all the pieces that really are saying that in order for a district to function, they have to have a curriculum that meets all the standards. They have to have teachers that are all licensed in their field. They have to have all those things in place. What we know is that Advanced Ed continues to operate. There's an annual charge, even in the years that there's no outside evaluation, and then there's a charge plus lodging and transportation in a year that they would come in and do an outside review. And our sense is that we've come to a point in history where this is such a duplication of all the efforts that we're now providing that it doesn't make any sense anymore. I would also reflect that if we look at the entire Big Nine schools conference, so Rochester Century, Mayo, John Marshall, Winona, Red Wing, Albert Lee, Faribault, Owatonna, Mankato, East and West, and Austin, none of them are advanced ed accredited anymore. If they were, they have already dropped it. And so we really believe that we're at a point in time where we need to get that done. And I'm, at this point, unless there's a concern on the part of the board, my intention will be just to continue forward and make that happen as of July 1, 2014. I just want to make sure you were aware of what we were doing and why. And again, this has been one of those things where I think it was a wonderful program at the turn of the, not this century, but the turn of the last century, when there really was a huge differential in terms of the quality of schools. That now, between the federal government and the state government and local efforts, really is no longer makes good sense, I think, for us to be involved. So I just wanted to share that with you and address any other concerns you might have there.
Thanks, Joe. And then the third item that got added in our table file is that Rob Hardy has agreed to take on the board liaison position to the District Youth Council. And I think they're going to try to meet maybe even before the summer gets too far underway.
I think Marnie already has sent out a doodle poll to find out a time that people can get together. I know they've already been doing some initial training and discussion with the students that have been identified, and I think Marnie intends to get together with Zach and Rob and Joel to really kind of talk about what should be the structure and focus of the DYC so that it reflects a similar strategy as the Mayor's Youth Council has provided in the past for the city.
All right. So thank you, Rob. And we are ready to talk about future meetings, which are this summer, Monday, July 14th, and then not again until Monday, August 11th.
And just to clarify, there is a second board meeting in August as well. It just isn't listed here.
Yeah. There's only these 2 months where we have just June and July where we have a single meeting.
Thanks to Nita. And before I ask for a motion for adjournment, I remind board members that we have a closed negotiation session following our regular school board meeting here. With that, I would ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Noel. Second. Oh, I'll get to Julie. Second. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting say aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.